Hello everyone, welcome to the third and final holiday mini video. Without further ado, let's get into these last 3 ridiculous minis. First up, we've got the Christmas tree, then a wizard, and we've got a random object and a monster. The random object is going to be a jar of pickles, and the random monster is going to be a kobold. Now, there are a lot of choices I had to make here. I had to decide, is the kobold the wizard? Or is the Christmas tree the wizard? Are they friends or are they enemies? And how do I fit a jar of pickles into this story? And it ended up being a very goofy scene. I decided that the tree is alive and it is going to be fighting the kobold. So I'm giving it some stick legs for it to run after the kobold. I used several tiered muzzle flashes to build the tree. I thought it looked better without the actual Hero Forge pine tree sticking out. I had to think about why a Christmas tree would come to life and chase after somebody, and I think that a Christmas tree would maybe feel that its purpose is to shelter and look over the presents. So perhaps the kobold is stealing something, and perhaps it's stealing a jar of pickles. So I've never tried this before, but there's a tutorial posted by Solar Simon DM on Reddit about how to make a transparent object. It is not printable. This is purely just for looks, but you have to invert something like this helmet, and then you can put objects inside of it. And it was very difficult to maneuver and stretch. And I realized a few times that once you put an object inside, especially if you snap it inside, you can't get it back out. So a little bit of tweaking was required, but I think overall it's what levels this piece up just a little bit. And then I'm adding bananas, and the bananas are going to be pickles. The border of the object is not entirely there. It's hard to explain. It was difficult to make it look like his hand was grasping the outside of the jar and not going straight through it. Yeah, as you can see, I had to bend the jar so I could color in the pickles and then put them back into place. I think it's hilarious that this kobold is risking it all for a jar of pickles. I'm going to use what's left of my kitbashing to add ornaments and baubles and candles to the tree. Unfortunately, I couldn't deck it out as much as I wanted it to, and I still feel like it looks a little weird and not as full as I'd want it to look. But I'm adding a starfish at the top, and I kind of wanted the lanterns to look like eyes. And yes, if it wasn't clear, the tree is the wizard. I don't know if it was a human wizard turned into a tree or if he's always been a tree. It's up to you to decide. I put in a draft of a model from forever ago, and then I put 2 ornaments in his hands and stuck his hands out through the leaves, so I got 2 extra pieces there without using up kitbashing. If you count how much an object takes up in the kitbashing percent, you can sort of be clever in how to go above the limit. So if you leave like 98% open and then you bring in a bigger object, you can still bring in that big object and then your kitbashing percentage will be 105, say. So you have to pick which objects you want to put in first to get the most out of kitbashing, if that makes sense. These 3 minis are focused more on the final image and not printability and practicality. I'm trying to push the limits a little bit of like what I can do on Hero Forge itself. I'm thinking of them more as 3D models in a image than a potential physical mini, and how I could play with depth and color and using an entire space outside of the stage. So these ones are a little bit goofier and are more about me having fun. Does the Christmas tree look angry? Does it look like it has an angry face? Does it look like a Christmas tree? I think it works. It works for the story. Just adding a few more bits and bobs to him. And there we go, the Christmas tree wizard chasing after the kobold who stole a jar of pickles. Next up we've got stocking / gift. Then we've got paladin, a random career, and a random emotion. So those are going to be a food scientist and shame. This one made me put my head in my hands. I had no idea how to start this. And then, this sometimes happens, it ended up being my favorite of the 3. So I hope you enjoy what I came up with. I'm going to start with building the fireplace. I'm going to focus more on the stocking aspect. I'm using the planter box and then just a simple arch and a campfire. The arch looked too plain, and I knew I was going to be using my kitbashing elsewhere, so I opted for this ring instead, just to give it some more texture. So I kept thinking food scientist, what does a food scientist do? And then integrating the shame aspect, I was thinking, okay, maybe they're feeling a little ashamed by the state in which their Christmas cookies that they're leaving out for Santa are. But how do they know that the Christmas cookies aren't the best? They're probably looking at it under a microscope. That's what food scientists do, right? So that means that I'm going to build a microscope. And I want it to be more antique looking, since this is still like in a fantasy vibe. I pulled out a bunch of rifle, weapon attachments, magnifying glass, and then other little pieces I thought could pull it together. This used the majority of the kitbashing. Again, just going through every single possible object and pulling out whatever I thought would work. I used the scroll to add some more detail and give the stand a fancier look. Then got the plate of cookies out and put a cookie underneath the microscope. For the stockings, I'm just adding these boots and then putting some presents inside. Giving it a fir tree branch on the mantle. And that's all the kit bashing I got. Now I still do want to keep this in a fantasy setting, so I'm going to make this character a tiefling. And she's going to be wearing a fancy pajama set. And then her wife. I'm adding another character to this scene. I want them to be having a bit of an interaction about the cookies. As for which one's the paladin, I don't know. It could be both, truthfully. I'm imagining they're heroes of some realm, and yet they struggle to bake food-safe cookies for Santa. I also like that the shame prompt is also reflecting on the wife's face. I kind of put that prompt onto her once she came into the scene. I don't know who these characters are, but they immediately came to life once both of them were in the scene, and I love them. I don't even have names for them. I just want to know more of their story and dynamic, so maybe I'll revisit them in the future. Our food scientist is gesturing to her wife, saying, "Come over here, take a look at this." Again, I wanted to have little bits of fantastical elements, so they're also going to have a pet owl. And the wife's hand's bandaged up, maybe from fighting monsters. Maybe she just got into a brawl, who knows. Even if this scene has a little bit of domestic tension, it feels very warm and cozy. I'm giving the tiefling some freckles that are going to glow a little bit. Again, just a little bit more magic. And they're both dressed for the occasion. Note that there's also a little stocking in the center. I don't know what that implies. The exhausted wife is also kind of implied to be the one who made the cookies. She's wearing an apron. She's going to be covered in flour. It just adds another dynamic to the whole thing. I know this is such a small thing, but I love the plate. I like that it has a green border. It looks like a real Christmas plate to me, I suppose. Whatever that means. So we've got the stockings, the food scientist, the shame, and the paladin/paladins. Like I said, I adore this scene. It started out with me being like, dang, I think I'm stuck. And now I've got 2 new characters that I might want to explore more. Alright, final Christmas mini. We've got sledding, a barbarian, clothes and elements, which is going to be fleece, like a fleece jacket, and space. These are fantasy elements, by the way, if that wasn't clear. So I'm going to go for a big guy. I'm going to make a big cyclops. I'm trying to incorporate the new Hero Forge parts. The very first thing that came to me was a barbarian sledding too hard and somehow sledding through a portal into space. So I'm going to be playing with perspective here. It doesn't really make sense as a physical mini, but for an image using 3D parts, it's fun. He's going to be sledding on a shield. I also like the shield kind of looks like a UFO saucer. And then I'm going to be using the new bomber jacket for his fleece. I want him to be somewhat armored up, but barbarians typically don't wear a lot of armor. So the fleece kind of inspired me to give him modern parts to his look, like the beanie and the scarf, but I still wanted just a little bit of fantasy. He is a cyclops after all. So yeah, he's flying through the portal. This one was pretty straightforward. It didn't take me long. I'm trying to think of it as representing flying into the new year, which can feel like flying into the void, I don't know. I really didn't like how that ramp looked, so I'm using a pyramid and then I'm going to build rocks around it. So maybe he's flying off snow-covered rocks instead. And those little trees are going to add the perspective that I want. This is just going to rely really heavily on colors, lighting, and share when I'm building the image. That's what's going to pull it all together, more than the parts themselves. I wanted the colors of space to be leaking through the portal, and then vice versa. I'm going to add a little bit of snow the other direction. And there's the barbarian sledding into space in his fleece jacket. I hope everyone has a happy holiday and a happy new year. I've got plenty of ideas lined up for 2026, and I'm so excited to share them with you. I appreciate all the support, all the comments, all the subscribers. It means a lot to me. Talk to you soon.